It all started with a name. A single insignificant detail that would detonate a quiet life and unleash a firestorm of digital hate. Imagine waking up one morning to discover that, overnight, you have become the most despised person on the internet. Your face is everywhere, attached to a vile act you didn't commit. Your name is a trending hashtag, synonymous with bigotry. This wasn't a nightmare. It was the sudden, brutal reality for a woman whose only crime was an unfortunate resemblance to a stranger in a viral video. The world had condemned her without a trial, based on a single damning piece of footage. But the reality of the situation, the story behind the hashtags and the headlines, turned out to be far more shocking and unjust than anyone could have imagined. The internet had found its villain, but it had gotten the wrong person. What followed was a modern-day digital mob, a story of mistaken identity so catastrophic it serves as a terrifying reminder of how quickly a mob can form in the digital age, and how devastating its wrath can be. Before the storm, her life was a portrait of unremarkable normalcy. She lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where neighbors exchange pleasantries over trimmed hedges, and the rhythm of the week is marked by school runs and weekend errands. Her days were filled with the familiar cadence of a working mother, juggling a career she was passionate about, helping her children with their homework, and finding moments of peace in the quiet hours after they went to bed. She was known among her friends as thoughtful and kind, someone who valued her privacy and cherished her close-knit family. Her world was small, safe, and entirely her own. It was a life built on routine and predictability, a million miles away from the chaos and cruelty of viral infamy. She had no idea that a video, filmed miles away by people she had never met, was about to shatter that peace into a million irreparable pieces. Nothing could have prepared her for the moment her ordinary existence would collide with the fury of the internet. The spark that ignited the inferno was a grainy cell phone video shot during a Philadelphia Phillies baseball game. The footage was short but potent. It captured a woman, her face contorted in anger, unleashing a torrent of offensive insults and profanity at people seated nearby. The video was ugly, indefensible, and perfectly packaged for viral consumption. Within hours, it had exploded across social media. On Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok, an army of digital sleuths mobilized, determined to identify the woman who would be christened Phillies Karen. The hunt was on, and the mob was baying for blood. It didn't take long for them to find a target. Working with blurry screenshots and a thirst for justice, the online detectives scoured the internet, cross-referencing social media profiles and public records. Soon, they zeroed in on a name and a face, a woman who bore a passing resemblance to the person in the video. Her photo was posted, her identity confirmed, and the floodgates of hate were thrown wide open. The shocking truth, however, was that they had the wrong woman. The person they had identified, whose life they were now systematically dismantling, was completely innocent. While the internet was busy convicting her, the real evidence that would exonerate her was slowly coming to light, ignored by the masses who had already made up their minds. The key revelation came not from a dramatic confession, but from simple, verifiable facts that had been overlooked in the frenzy. Friends and family of the accused woman began to speak out, providing photographic proof and alibis showing she was nowhere near the stadium on the day of the incident. More importantly, professional journalists, doing the due diligence the online mob had skipped, began to investigate. They uncovered the identity of the actual woman in the video, a different person entirely, who would later be identified by law enforcement. The public perception was that of a hateful bigot caught on camera. The reality was that an innocent bystander, a mother with a quiet life, had been caught in the digital crossfire. Her face and name mistakenly plastered onto a stranger's shameful actions. The internet had seen a simple, damning video clip. The full context revealed a catastrophic case of mistaken identity. But the truth was a footnote in a story that had already been written. The chain reaction of destruction was swift and merciless. For the innocent woman, life turned into a living hell. Her social media accounts were inundated with thousands of messages filled with serious threats and hateful comments. Her personal information, including her home address and phone number, was exposed online and spread across dark corners of the web, turning her private sanctuary into a prison. The deluge of harassment was so intense that her employer, fearing a public relations nightmare, was forced to take action. And she lost the job she loved. The career she had spent years building vanished in an instant. Her children were targeted at school, forced to endure whispers and taunts about their hateful mother. On social media, she was unfairly portrayed as the villain. In reality, she was a terrified victim, watching her world crumble because of a mistake she couldn't control. The public saw a moment of justice for a bigot. Behind the scenes, an innocent family was being torn apart by a lie. Desperate to reclaim her life, she began the Herculean task of trying to control the narrative. How do you fight an enemy as vast and amorphous as the internet? How do you reason with a mob that doesn't want to listen? Her first steps were to protect her family. She deleted her social media profiles and changed her phone number. But it was like trying to put out a forest fire with a water pistol. The threats continued. She issued public statements through news outlets, pleading her innocence and presenting the evidence that cleared her name. She begged people to look at the facts, to see that a terrible mistake had been made. But her pleas were often drowned out by the lingering noise of the initial outrage. Every attempt to set the record straight was met with a fresh wave of skepticism and abuse from those who either refused to believe they were wrong or simply didn't care. She was forced to hide, to retreat from a world that had judged her so unfairly, fighting a battle for her reputation from the shadows of a life that was no longer her own. In the months and years that followed the incident, the headlines faded, and the internet mob moved on to its next target. For the public, the story of Phillies Karen became a distant memory, another flash in the pan of viral outrage. But for the woman wrongly caught in its blaze, the aftermath is a daily reality. She has had to slowly, painstakingly rebuild her life from the ashes. Finding new employment was an immense challenge, as her name had become inextricably linked to the scandal, a digital stain that followed her everywhere. Though the truth of her innocence was eventually established in the public record, the emotional scars remain. She lives with a lingering sense of anxiety, a fear of being recognized, a deep-seated distrust of the digital world that so casually destroyed her peace. She learned a brutal lesson about the fragility of reputation and the terrifying power of misinformation. Today, she continues to advocate for greater accountability online, hoping her story can serve as a cautionary tale. She is moving forward, not as a victim, but as a survivor of a trial by fire, forever changed by the day the internet decided she was guilty. Her experience leaves us with a haunting question. In our relentless pursuit of instant justice, how many more innocent lives will be ruined before we learn to seek the truth first?